We've already done the degassing and conditioning. We blasted off the oxidation. We put it in the alcohol for a couple minutes, cleaned it up, so the metal was done. Then we went ahead and we opaqued 3 separate times. The first coat was called a slurry coat or a wash coat. It was very thin, like milk. You painted it on. When it came out, you couldn't even see it. It was that thin. It still looked gray. Then you did a second coat. You baked it again. Then you did a third coat. You baked it again. Now it should have a nice, smooth finish. If you look at the cuspid, you see no metal, or at least you're not supposed to see metal. Okay? It has an eggshell finish, slightly shiny, right? Very like a satin finish or an eggshell. You know what an egg looks like when you take it out of the refrigerator? That's the look it should have. It should not be overly glazed, which is no good, nor should it be flat and grainy. That's underbaked. Okay, so now, before we start, remember I said you got to know where you're going to go before you start? How do you know where you're going unless you know where you're going, right? You can't just jump on this and start dumping porcelain. Right? If you're going to drive somewhere, you look at a map, you look at your GPS, you got to figure out where you're going. So let's stop and look at it. This is a maxillary right cuspid. Take the maxillary right cuspid and look at it. Bless you. It has a V shape, right, from the cervical. It has a V shape from the cusp. If I look straight down at it, it has a V shape. Okay? Look at the contour of it. Where is the widest part on the labial side of a cuspid? Where's the height of contour? Cervical third. Where is it on the lingual side? Cervical third. Where is it on the mesial and distal side? It's kind of the middle third, but if you look at the mesial side, see how it's a little higher? And look at the distal side, see how it's a little lower? Okay? You have 3 prominent lobes. What is the most prominent lobe of the 3? The middle lobe, right, and that's why you have that V shape, so it runs down the center. If you look at the lingual side, you have a cingulum. You have a mesial and distal marginal ridge. You have lingual fosses, right? You got to know all this stuff before you start. Don't just start throwing on the porcelain and then tell me the oven ruined your work. The oven didn't ruin your work. You ruined your work. If you put in a nice crown, you get a nice crown. You put in a lousy crown, you get a lousy crown. If you don't like it, do not put it in the oven. Wash it off and do it again. Once it goes in the oven, you're married to it. Well, really, the only way to get it off is to shock it off. The way you shock it off, if you don't like it, you take the crown, you put it back in the oven, you run it up to 1800 degrees, you get a bowl of ice cold water, you take the crown out, you immediately throw it into ice cold water, the porcelain explodes. It shatters, right, because of the thermal conductivity. Remember, ceramic's very low thermal conductivity. It explodes. You clean up the metal, you start all over again. Right? You have to re-opaque 3 times, rebake. You probably lost a whole day. All right? In a lab, that's a few minutes. But for you, it's a whole day. All right? So don't put anything you don't like. So let's stop for a second. Look at the other cuspid. If you look at it, it's a relatively short cuspid. There are spaces. There are diastomers on the mesial and distal side. It's about the same size as the lateral and the premolar. See it? So it's, don't build, this giant tooth because that's not the way it is. See it on the other side? So now, you're staying in about that height, okay? Porcelain's going to shrink how much? 10%. Yeah, because some people shrink 10%. Don't be surprised if you guys shrink 50%. I guarantee you, if you build 2 millimeters of porcelain, 2 millimeters is not a lot. If you build 2 millimeters of porcelain or 1.5 millimeters and you have that much porcelain, okay, I bet you when it comes out, you're going to go from that down to that. So if I go from 2 millimeters to 1 millimeter, that's a 50% shrinkage. It's not the porcelain, it's you. You haven't learned how to control the porcelain yet. Eventually you'll get the hang of it and you'll know how much it should shrink. So remember, it shrinks towards the center or towards the densest part. So not only will the crown shrink down, it'll shrink in mesial distal, it'll shrink in diagonally, the labial will go in, the lingual will go in, everything will shrink in and down. The tooth is going to be a lot smaller when it comes out. So now that we know what a cuspid looks like, or we think we know what it looks like, stop and look at the crown and see if we're going to have a problem. I have enough room up for the cuspid, right? Doctor gave me enough room. I have enough room mesial and distal. I have enough room on the lingual, the cingulum, the fossa, the marginal ridges. I have enough room. There's a place I have a problem, right here in the central lobe. Can you see that bulge running up the center? If I look at the height and I look at the other teeth and I see the alignment, if I come over to this, the people that are standing to my right side, how much room do I have to add porcelain? I have 0, right? And I'm at the opaque. I know this crown, she did a lovely job, right? It was nicely thinned out. The metal was thinned out to 0.2. She laid a couple coats of opaque. Everything was fine, right? It's not her fault. The preparation was too prominent. So you have to call the doctor and tell him that not enough area was reduced on the central lobe of the cuspid. The doctor, thank you for calling. Give it your best shot. Right? If I need 1.5 millimeters of porcelain right here, it's going to be bulky. It's not going to be bulky anywhere else. It's only going to be bulky right there. All right? So everybody understand that? Okay. So now, I know that. I know I already have a problem before I've even started. So now, I have dentin, I have opacious dentin, and I have enamel. The majority of the tooth is built up in dentin, right? Like a natural tooth, right? Dentin. The enamel will be up on the incisal area, right? Depending on our shade guide. We'll talk about that in a second. We'll look at the enamel. What do you think opacious dentin is for? They call it opacious dentin because it's a combination of opaque and dentin. So what they did was they took a little bit of the opaque, they took a little bit of dentin, they put the two together. By putting opaque into the dentin, it's making it less translucent. The areas that I use opacious dentin is in areas where I don't have enough room. Where did we say we don't have enough room? Right down the middle, right? Right down the middle. And when you come down to the cervical area, right where the cemento-enamel junction is, that porcelain is going to be ultra, ultra thin down there, right? So therefore, when we build up in that area, we don't want metal to show through, we don't want opaque to show through, so we need a porcelain that has less translucency, okay? Therefore, that's opacious dentin. So we'll start with the opacious dentin. We'll lay a little bit down in the cervical third, we'll lay a little bit right down the central lobe. Even when you get to your molar, when you do your molar, I'm sure you don't have enough room right down in the mesial, distal, and central pit area. You probably don't have enough room. So we're going to lay a little opacious dentin in there. If you look at the buccal cusp, right, the buccal surface, buccal cusp, right there, you can see that doctor did not give us 2 millimeters. So that's a problem area. Remember I kept sending you back saying, thin it out, thin it out, thin it out? I knew you were going to have a problem. We're going to lay opacious here. If you look at this mesial marginal ridge, it's too high. We're going to lay it here. If you look at the lower central, is there any room? At 0. Even if you blew a hole through the crown, which some of you did, there's still not enough room, right? So we're going to put opacious dentin right down the center to cut down on translucency. All right, that's what I mean about thinking about this before you start. Okay, so instruments we can use. Years ago, when we first all started building porcelain, we all used build-up instruments. Nowadays, everyone uses brushes. If you get some of the older technicians, they will still use build-up instruments. Is it Tanaka or Kawada? I forget.
Tanaka.
In Jersey.
Oh, Kawada.
Yeah. When he builds a large case, to this day, he said on his first build-up, where he's putting a lot of porcelain on a lot of crowns, he still uses his spatula just for efficiency, to move along quickly, to build up the crown. Then when he starts doing small increments, he'll use a small brush, and he'll build from there. All right, so I want you to try both. Even when I did the opaque, remember when I did the opaque? I did it with a brush, I did it with a spatula, we did it with a glass rod. Some people have spray guns. I forgot to pull it out, but we have a little spray gun, like when you do body work on a car and they spray paint a car. Same thing, little tiny, you mix up the opaque, you put it in the gun, and you just shoot it on. Okay? So there's a lot of different ways to do the same thing. Not better or worse, just different ways to do it. We have a build-up brush. A large brush would be either a number 6 or a number 8. Who bought the brush from Pearl? There you go. So this brush cost how much? $5? Okay, not bad. If this came from a dental company, a good ceramic brush could cost $30, $40, and $50.
$40.
A brush.
Yeah.
They did? Oh, you're going to buy that next time. Okay. So this is a $5 brush. If you notice, when we pick up porcelain, we don't brush it on like we're painting a wall. We pick it up almost like we're picking it up with a shovel. Okay? So it should have a very firm point. When I touch it to my finger or to my hand, the tip should not bend. So this looks like a really nice brush. But when I'm just touching it, I can see this brand new brush. It's already bending. So the fibers are a little too soft on here. For $5, it's worth the $5 because you guys are going to kill your brushes. But a good brush will hold its point, so I can go right in and pick it up. Small brush for adding small areas, right? These are the brushes that you guys have, right? Your kit, okay? Your $65 kit or whatever it is they charge. Well worth the money. You got 5 different brushes, okay? So Make sure you put it back inside the tube, and don't share with anybody, because once this brush is ruined, it's ruined. The brushes are used for nothing else. Water, shake it off on her pants, and now you have a nice narrow tip, okay? Do not touch it with your dirty hands. Don't stick it in your mouth. You're going to see a lot of ceramists, they lick their brushes.
Oh my God.
Yes, they're a little nasty.
Yeah, a lot of them do, and I don't want to mention his name, but there's people in here. No, she's being taped. Don't mention other people's names. But people, yeah, you'll see a lot of ceramists lick. I don't want to be eating glass, okay? Then go into your mom's makeup cabinet like I did 35 years ago. This was an Estee Lauder rouge brush. Okay, I use this when you're adapting porcelain, and my mom's still looking for this 35 years later, that her brush. So if you see my mother, don't tell her where it is because she'll be really mad at me. When you build porcelain, and you're going to see when you're putting it on, it's, you know, you don't know what you're doing, right? It's a little rough, it's kind of cakey. You want it nice and smooth. You can take a rouge brush, or you can take, well, they're called whipping brushes. So I have a couple brushes here that you can borrow. Borrow is the key word. And then as you build it, you just very lightly go over it and smooth the crown off, right? Brush it vertically. I like to brush vertically because if I have dentin down here and I have incisal up here, remember, I hate the word stacking. All ceramists now use the word stacking. When you hear stacking, to me that means you're stacking bricks. That's not what porcelain looks like, right? We don't stack porcelain. We are layering porcelain, layering over so you cannot see where one goes and the next one starts, okay? So I'd rather they use the word layering, but everybody's using the word stacking now. But you don't want to see where one ends and the next one starts. If you blend it properly and then you take the whipping brush and you lightly brush it down, not only does it smooth it off, it'll trickle the incisal over the body porcelain and you won't see the two lines, right? You don't want to see stripes, all right? So you blend. Plus it also condenses the porcelain more. So the more you wipe it, and some people still tap their porcelain to get the water out of it, it's being held together with water, right? This is only powder, right? So it's being held together just by the water. Once we go to bake it, we're going to dry it out. After we dry it out, it takes 3 to 5 minutes to dry out a crown on the cycle. Make sure you're on the right cycle over there, because the other half of you people last week were not. But I caught everybody before they ruined it, so I hope I catch you too. All right? So it needs a certain amount of water. In the old days, the particles in here were so large that you had to tap it, you had to brush it, you had to touch it with tissue paper to pull out the excess. Porcelain is getting so good and the particles are so fine. Remember in materials when we talked about gypsum, and we said the difference between dental plaster, dental stone, and dye stone, right, was how they refined it. And as the particles got smaller, the particles got closer together, right? And as the particles got closer together, we had less what? We had less water. If we had less water, right, water has no strength to it, right? And when water evaporates, what's left there? Nothing, right, she's right, nothing, air. Does air have any strength to it? No. We want to get the particles real close. So think of like if I had a big barrel. If I put a bunch of basketballs in a barrel, won't I have a lot of space around the basketballs? But if I then had golf balls or little marbles and I put them, aren't they closer? So I have less water, I have less air, I have more powder, I have more strength, all right? So, got the general idea, have my instruments, I have my whipping brush if I need it, I have a large build-up brush, I have a small build-up brush, I have my spatula, and I have a cutting instrument. If you look at this, this has a little knife edge on it. So if I'm working on a particular tooth and I want to go down into the occlusion, look at how this instrument fits in at a 45-degree angle. Right, this is really nice. I can come in with an instrument and I can make these cuts. Just like when you guys do a wax-up, right? Don't you go in with your carving instruments and you carve your anatomy? So imagine that I'm doing a wax-up. The only difference is instead of using wax, I'm using porcelain. We're not going to build a big meatball here, right? This porcelain costs a lot of money. How much does this kit cost?
$40 with taxes.
Yeah. Oh, okay. You got it.
Something with taxes.
Good. You got a good price. This bottle is at least $125.
Hell no.
Yeah. Why would I want to build up a big blob of porcelain and then hack away at it? It's a waste of time to build it up. It's a waste of time to cut it down. It's a waste of material. Just like when you do a wax-up, the whole idea is to build it to the correct contour, right? Same thing with the porcelain here. Build it to the correct contour. All right, so now I've been talking. Now I can get started, all right? But you get the idea. I mean, if you didn't get all this, you're just going to be slopping all over the place. You're not going to understand what's going on. keep the bottles in order so you know you don't mix things up. Oh, and the first time you open this, give it a shake so all the particles are mixed together. It's like, you go to Home Depot and they shake the can of paint for you.
Yeah.
If you don't use that paint right away and you leave it in your house for a couple weeks, what happens to paint?
Porcelain.
Right, especially if there's colors in it.
Yeah.
The colors will start separating out, right? You get the wooden stick and you stir it up or you reshake it, right? So make sure, bring it back to the store and let them mix it. Okay. Oh, do not take more than you need. You cannot put it back in the jar. Also close the jar. If you get any dust in here, you killed your whole jar. So here's my Opacious Dentin. Here, most of my tooth is going to be made out of regular Dentin, I think. So let's put that in here, I think. Well, I'm going to tell you in a second why I'm thinking, and in a couple of seconds I'll know for sure. Now I'm going to take a little bit of incisal, also known as enamel. Put a little of that on. So now, remember I said I didn't know what I was doing. But now I can pick up my shade guide. What shade are you guys? A2, A3, whatever. My kit happens to be C3. So what do I see? I see red, yeah. So the whole idea, we already have a problem, right, with perception. Take something white. Hold the shade guide against a neutral white background with white light. If you have a white light, everything's neutral. If I had an incandescent yellow bulb, what am I going to see? Yellow. Yeah. So, you got to start here. So now, let's stop and look at it. C3 is a darker shade. You guys are, what did you say? A2? A2? Okay, let me pull out an A2. Let's put them next to each other so you can see the difference. And it's not always about lightness and darkness, because when you look at the two, if you're over my shoulder, you can see it. I have more of a sort of a brownish gray look coming up 75% of my tooth. I have a little bit of incisal across the top, and it trickles down. I have a little bit of orange in the center, but it's sort of a grayish color. Whereas if I look at yours, your incisal comes down 50% of the way, 50%. But if I look down in the cervical third, I can see an orangish texture here, right? An orange-yellow texture. Can you see where one ends and the next one starts? No, you can't see it, right? So you do me a favor and turn off the vacuum back there so it's not coming into the recording. I'm screaming over it. So now, if you guys are an A2, look at this. You notice it's relatively dark in the cervical third. It has a real orangish with even a brownish tint to it. I come up a little higher. I still have it. But the incisal's coming down halfway, and it goes into the corners. You see a bluish halo, almost transparent. Not translucent, but transparent across the tip. That means it's going to be all incisal right on the tip. But once I come down a couple of millimeters, I start to see body, right, or dentin porcelain in here. That's what I mean about don't stack it, right? We're layering on top of layer on top of layer. This one, of course, you can see is much darker. Why is it darker? Because the pigments that are in here eat up the light. If the light is eaten up, the value is going down. If the value goes down, some people say it's darker, some people say it has less livelihood, less translucency, right? But really it has nothing to do with it. So here's yours, here's mine. So let's take this. Let's put yours back in here. And that's what I want you to do. I have a whole bunch of these. This thing goes for about $60. So you can borrow it with a capital B. You can borrow it. Well, when you borrow it, take the whole thing with the box and return it the same way. Don't just pull out the one shade guide, because I know you're going to lose it or I'm going to lose it. So you take, I have a bunch of these. I'll bring them in. We'll take out the whole box. All right, so now I'm ready to start. We know what a cuspid looks like. Let's get that. And I have a lot of samples. When you're building the porcelain, why don't you come up and borrow a tooth? Okay, I have a whole set over there. That's about $500. Actually, those are about $400. So these are not cheap things, please.
I have a yard sale, okay?
Yeah, sure, thanks. I know at Home Depot it's on sale, right? Okay. I prefer Lowe's myself.
I'm a feeling bad.
Home Depot's too dirty for me.
Free market, don't worry.
All right, so now look. I took it out, I've looked at this, I see I have enough room, we know where the problem is, okay, so I checked it out. Take this off, I don't need this anymore. Let's get this out of the way. So now when I look at it, remember I know where the problem is, right down the center, okay, I know what's going on, I'm ready to start. Okay, so let's make sure everything's closed up, let's get this out of the way. Oh, very special liquid. Special liquid. Is my bottle of water back there somewhere? There was a squirt bottle. Could I have my bottle of water? Okay, so the big question. What's the difference between my little squirt bottle of water and their bottle of secret modeling liquid.
Secret formula.
Huh?
Secret
Secret formula.
Yeah, it's a secret, like McDonald's, what's their special sauce? I don't
We don't
know.
know.
What's in Coke and Pepsi? I don't know. All right, but on this one, what it is, it's actually distilled, this is just distilled water, all right? Never use tap water. What's wrong with tap water?
Contaminated.
Contaminated with what?
Here.
New York City has the best water in the world.
Doesn't it have like chlorine?
But what's in it? It has chlorine, it has fluoride in it, there's rust in that water, there's all kinds of minerals and particles, even though we got the best drinking water in the world. I have no problem with it. I don't want those minerals in my porcelain. So look over there, you see that big jar sitting over there between the two by the oven? Water, that's what we used for years. But now we have modeling liquid. What they've done is they've taken water, they put a little bit of oil, glycerin, in it. If I put a little bit of oil mixed in with this, see the problem is when you guys start building, because it's warm in here, it's going to keep drying out. And you don't know how much water, too much, too little, too much, too little, it's going to drive you crazy. This stuff evaporates very slowly, so it gives you more time to work. See, this stuff is going to evaporate. Every couple seconds, you're going to be like, gee, where'd all my water go? All right? So I always keep, if you notice, I put 3 porcelains in here, and on the side, I put a little bit of water into the well over here. Okay? A lot of ceramists, I'm only using 3 powders right here. A lot of ceramists will use 5 and 10 powders. But that's very high-end ceramic work. Most ceramists, believe me, I don't care what they say when you go to these fancy meetings and they line up their 10 and 20 bottles of porcelain. The vast majority of ceramists will use an Opacious, a regular Dentin, and an enamel. And that's what they use. You know, if they start getting into more and more powders, then the crowns get more and more expensive. All right? I mean, when you look at restorations like this, there's at least half a dozen powders have been adapted. I mean, you look at these crowns, this is not 3. I can see so many different colors. Once you know what you're looking at, you're going to start the perception. You'll start seeing all these different colors. Right now, you look at it, to you, you just see light and dark. All right, so now, ready to start. Let's take our instruments. Let's take our mixing spatulas. I'm going to add a little bit of water. And if you add too much water, you can just take a tissue and dab it and get it out. The best tissue you can probably find is just good old regular toilet paper. Okay. White paper. Don't start getting colored tissue. If you start getting colored tissue, what's the problem? Yeah, the pigment will start coming out of the paper into your porcelain. So now if you look at this, you can see some of them have a nice consistency, some a little, but then this one, look, too thin. See it? How watery it is? So I can just take my little bit of tissue paper and just very carefully hold it on the side and dab it, and it'll take out any excess water. Because I don't want to have too much water, and I don't want to have too little. And that's the problem. You're all going to have, it's like first time you learned how to drive a car, and you stepped on the brake. And I tell you to step on the brake lightly. Well, what does that mean? Or if I tell you to step on the gas and get up to 30 miles an hour, how hard do you step on a gas pedal? You have no idea, right? You don't know. You're going too fast, you're going too slow. Same thing here. You're clueless. So until you start working with it, you'll get the idea. All right, so now, let's start building up. Let's get the water out of the way. I have a nice consistency. I should be able to pick up the material, and I should be able to pick it up and place it where I want it. So remember I said the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add Opacious Dentin in any area that's a problem. So let's do it a couple ways. I can pick up a small increment, no more than that. You see how much I have on here? Next to nothing. Remember I said I have a little bit of a problem down in the cervical area? I can adapt a little bit of Opacious Dentin in the cervical area, or I did it with a spatula, or I can come in with my brush, shake it off on you, go underneath like a shovel, pick it up, she's trying to add it, work it down. See, I'm just adding a very little bit. Built it right to the margin, and all I did was add a little. I can come around. Remember I said I had a problem right in the center? I can take a little bit of Opacious Dentin. It's the same shade, so I don't want you to think that it's some crazy different color. It's not. And very lightly build it up to any area that I think I have a potential problem. So now I've added it down in the margin at the cemento enamel junction. I added a little bit right in the center to the lobe. Now, as you're working, if you think that say it's dripping all over, it's not supposed to drip. If it's slopping all over the place and it's dripping down the dye, it's too wet. Stop what you're doing. Just dab it a little bit. Keep the tissue close to you. You can take a tissue, touch it, and look, the water evaporated. You see it? The shine is gone. Just like when you opaque. Remember I told you sit still with the opaque, and then all of a sudden it just went away? I can take a tissue. Oh, never blot it straight on like this. Always blot it from the opposite side. Why am I doing that? Yeah, if I go this way and it draws the water, what else is it drawing?
Powder.
Yeah, it's taking the powder away, right? But if I go behind it, it's going to pull the water down. If it pulls the water down, it'll pull the powder down, right? I want the powder to stay there. So then when I get to the other side, if I have to blot it on the lingual, where am I going to put the tissue?
Opposite side.
Opposite side, labial, right? I always want to pull the powder down. Okay, so now I've gotten that far. Oh, if you keep a lid on this, if you have a top, you can save this stuff and then put water back in it tomorrow. But if it gets dirty, you got to throw it out. So only add how much you need for today. So now I'm ready to go on to the next. And again, too wet. So let's take a tissue. Let's draw some of the water out until I can pick it up almost like clay. So again, let's take a small amount, and we're going to do it both ways. We'll do it with a brush, and we'll do it with a spatula. So pick up a small amount of porcelain, still too wet. I'm glad you could see that. You're going to see, if you can't pick it up, it's too dry. If it goes all over the place, it's too wet. So now, pick up a small amount, put it in place. I like to get it right down into the mesial and distal first, because I find that I can blend it better if I can get it into the mesial and distal area first. Then I can build up, labial, lingual. But if I tap it into the corners, I don't have to worry about my contacts later. So I've taken my time, pick it up, tap, slowly work it down, each little bit. Can you see what I'm doing? Little bit, little bit, little bit. Pick up a little bit, tap, 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 tap. Bring it, and by tapping it, I'm actually vibrating it, and now you can see the two porcelains coming together. Eventually, you're not going to see any colors. You're not going to see three different colors. Everybody is going to blend together nicely with everyone else. I forgot to tell you what's step number 1. What's always the first step in your demonstration? Take a sip of your coffee. Oh, that's terrible. Okay. What the heck is that?
Tang.
Nah, it's not Tang, but it's not. I used to like Tang. When I was a kid, when the astronauts in the 60s started going up, that was so cool. I wanted to drink that stuff like the astronauts. Yeah, no, it's not Tang. It's something else. I picked it up in BJ's. They were selling it. Yeah, it wasn't Costco. I think it was BJ's. Okay, now. Okay, so now I started building up a tooth that kind of looks like a cuspid. Remember it has a V shape, right? V shape from the bottom, V shape from the top, V shape from the facial, V shape from the lingual. The widest lobe is the one in the center. All right, so slowly start building it up. And if I think I have too much water, just tap it a little bit. Take another little increment, put it on, tap it down into place, slowly, 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 work it down into place. Now, also, remember I said you can do it this way. Take an instrument, go underneath, pick up a small increment with the brush, put on that one little dot. If I can't shape it, I can take a little water, tap it down into place. Look, I start building the cusp, right? If I think it's too wet, come behind it, take it off. If I come again, take another little piece, pick it up, want to build another cusp, add it on, tap, 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 tap it down into place, work it down. Tap it down. It's supposed to look like a cuspid, right? It's not supposed to look like a meatball. So slowly make it look like a cuspid. If you think you have an area too much interproximally, get it out of there right now. Get it out, blend it down, tissue. If I think I need a tissue, touch it, tap it again. Okay? Now, I can come around to the lingual side and build the lingual side right now, right? Same thing. But let me keep going with the labial. So what I would do, because I don't want to keep you here all day, I would go around to the lingual side with a small brush. I would do the exact same thing. Now I can put it together. Let's see how it's looking. I'm getting there. Okay? It's just starting to touch. If you look on the inside, you can see I'm just about touching. Okay, so if you look down inside, you can see the occlusion. I'm almost there where the lingual marginal ridges are touching. So now I can jump over to my incisal. How am I doing here? That's all right. Pick up a little bit of incisal, one little bit, put it on top, tap it, tap it, tap it, tap it, work it into place, pick up another little piece, pick it up right on the tip, tap it, pick up another little piece, tap it into place. You notice each little drop I put on, I work it into place, right? Work it in, tap it down, pick up another little piece. The tip of the cusp, is it right in the center?
No.
No, it's slightly off. Look at the other tooth. So you have, remember, and then what's going to really drive you crazy is this will shrink. And you don't know. You've never built a crown before. You have no idea how much yours is going to shrink compared to the person next to you. So you slowly, slowly, slowly want to build it. But again, don't take all day doing this. Oh, it has to go in the oven today. You can't say, oh, I'm going to put it in my locker and I'll bake it tomorrow. That's not going to work. Because when the water evaporates, the whole thing's going to fall apart.
I have a question. Can you do one side now and then go back and do the other side
No,
later?
everything has to be done now. You know, so if I had 14 teeth, I would go back and forth between every single tooth. I don't build one tooth and one tooth, one tooth. So if I'm building the buccal, I'll do all the buccals. Then I'll do all the mesials, then I'll do all the distals, then I'll do all the incisals, then I'll do all the occlusals, then I'll do all the lingual cusps, then I'll do all the mesial marginal ridges, I'll do all the distal, because I have to keep everything wet. If I don't keep it wet, it's going to dry out, and if I start here, by the time I get over here, this guy fell apart already. All right, so I got to keep an equal amount of water. So now, what I can do, I can slowly brush it. A dry brush. Okay? Tap it, and I can start working it down. Now, I'm barely touching this. Okay? Oh, not on your hands. Okay? Because what's wrong with your hands? Oil, right? You want to do something, go like this. You know, go over here, do something in your lab coat. Do it on a tissue, but not on your hands, not in your mouth. Okay? All right? So now, again, when I stop and look at it, I can see, let's get it off the other tooth, let's get it off that tooth. And you're probably going to do this about 10 times before you get a good one. Do not put it in the oven unless it's a really nice looking tooth. Okay? You can see it's slightly bulky. Okay? You can see that the incisal is starting to trickle down. As I work with it, I can blend it down. The only reason you can see it is because of the food coloring. The blue and the pink and the yellows that are put in there, they burn out. They're all gone, right, after it goes into the oven. But you can see it's slightly taller, it's slightly wider, it looks like a cuspid. Okay? Now, remember it's going to shrink? Mm-hmm. When you did your wax-ups, this semester, the last thing you did, you took your wax-up out, and what'd you do before you put it in the oven? It's going to shrink. What do you do on the mesial and distal side?
Added a little bit of wax.
Added a little bit of wax, right? Why?
So that when you carve.
Right. So you have something to work with, but you knew it was going to shrink slightly, right? So after you took out your wax up, and look at this one. Look right here on the mesial. Can you see that little concavity right there? So if I know that I already have a little concavity, and if I know I'm probably going to shrink, heck, I might shrink 20% here maybe, right? I'm not... And, if I already have a little concavity and I know I'm going to shrink, it's going to get even worse, right? So the last thing you do is take a little bit of porcelain, put a drop of water, one little drop of water, take a little speck of porcelain, put it right into the contact area, tap it down, work it into place, take Mom's rouge brush, blend it down. It shouldn't look like you just added a meatball, right? It should look like you just added a little extra contact. Can I put it back in the model now?
No.
No, it won't fit, right? I built up just a little bit. I'll do the same thing on the other side. Take the crown, look at it, brush it off, stop, take your hemostat, which I can't find. Thank you. Take your hemostat, hook it on to the button, pick the crown up, turn it upside down, and look inside and make sure there's no porcelain. What happens if there's porcelain in there?
It won't go back on.
You're in big trouble. I mean, it will not go back in, right? So If you see any porcelain, let it dry. Take a small brush, a dry brush, go inside and just wiggle it around and blow out. Not a wet brush, because if there's porcelain and I touch it with water, it's just going to smear all over, right? So take a dry, even if you don't see anything, just get in the habit of the very last thing. Put it on the hemostat, get a dry brush, stick it in, wiggle it around, blow out, and you know there's nothing in there, right? The crown is ready. Now I can bring it over, I can put it on the peg, and I think it's programmed, I think we're running A2. But we got to check the oven, because you know somebody probably screwed up the oven before you got there, right? So we have to check it every single bake. Even if you walk away from that oven 5 minutes, that's enough time for somebody to go in and mess up the oven, right? And you go back and you say, I just used that oven. The oven was fine. Well, somebody messed it up when you walked away. You got to check the oven every single time. So now, this crown, had I finished the lingual side, I'm not going to keep you there, this crown would be ready to go in. I would put it over there, I'd start on it, and either you stay with it for 10 or 15 minutes, or you start building the next one, right? And you just keep them moving along. You're probably going to do that central. You might do it 10 times. I think I have porcelain here. I don't want you to waste your porcelain. I think I have jars of porcelain, practice porcelain. And I'll put them out here, big jars that have been donated by lab owners. And you can practice. Don't waste the stuff, your good stuff. Save this until you're ready. I don't care if you spend the whole day today. Build them up, wash them off. Build them up, wash them off. Build them up, wash them off. When you think you can do a central, do a cuspid. When you think you can do a cuspid, do a premolar. When you think you can do a premolar, do a molar. Right? And I'll show you how to do molars. You don't have